Hey, I'm Fred.
And I'm Ant.
And this is Creator Generation.
Create a generation of hype.
All right, Frederico, what is happening this week?
This week we're chatting with Andrew from Blender Guru.
If you only listen to split testing, like A/B split testing, like test this sales page, test it against this, if you only follow that, everyone would end up selling porn.
He gives us some excellent YouTube tips, but also talks to us about how smart YouTubers make money on the platform or around the platform.
Frederico, before we get started, we've been working really hard in the background on our own online course called Change Your College, the online college just for content creators. Check it out at
changeyourcollege.com. That's CHANGER college.com.
Let's get into it.
Let's get into it.
Well, Fred stuffed up the first part of the recording, so let's try this again. Today, Creator Generation, we are joined by the guru, the Blender guru, Andrew Price.
Hello for a second time. No. Hi, everyone.
I'm so sorry.
We're throwing Fred under the bus here because we got 5 minutes into the conversation and he went, hang on a second, I haven't pushed record yet.
It was really good too. We were having it was like, we can't repeat it. Like, you just had to be there. But, Andrew, Fred and I had some cracking conversation.
It was probably the best. It's probably the best start we ever had to a podcast. I'm like,
It was beautiful. You just had to be there.
It was almost poetic.
Anyway, Andrew, you are our first guru and maybe our only guru we'll ever have on the show. So you're a guru of blenders, right?
Yes, the Blender Guru, which whenever somebody asks me that at a party, they go, oh, Blender Guru. So what do? You make like smoothies? And I'm like, no, that's cooler than what I do. I do 3D software. So the software is called Blender. And I was cocky enough back in the day to call myself the guru of the software. So, and that was the channel name that stuck. So Blender Guru.
So you were saying at parties. So when people ask you at parties, what do you do? Do you say I am the Blender Guru and just let's see what happens, or do you actually just say I don't know, I'm on YouTube? What do you say? What do you say to people when people ask you what do you do?
Depends if you want the conversation to keep going, right? It's like, usually. Almost nobody knows what the software is, or, so if I know the next follow-up question, so I usually just say, yeah, I run a channel called Blender Guru, which is like 3D animation tutorials. So if you've ever seen like a Pixar movie, the animation, I do tutorials that show you how to make that kind of stuff using some free software called Blender. And they go, there you go.
And if you want the conversation to stop right there, you just say, I'm an accountant. And
yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's like, you ever have those conversations, like you be on a plane or something and you're just not in the mood, and then like somebody will just ask you a question and you don't want the conversation to go anywhere. So you come up with like the shortest response that won't lead to anything, Yeah. If you say you're a YouTuber, it's like, oh, tell me more, But I try to be friendly, but there's also times when you just like most of us, not in the mood for chit chat. So yeah.
I'm an Uber driver. Like, that doesn't need.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
although that would open up a lot of questions. Like, have people done really amazing, weird stuff in your Uber?
Just say you're a telemarketer. That's how you end it.
That's a good one. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, I'm a telemarketer. Okay, cool.
Yeah, punched in the face. We've gone somewhere else, but that's cool. So being the guru of the Blender software, like you said, you started doing this a long time ago. What made you start? Like, were you?
Yeah. So I started 15 years ago when I was in high school. And like most teenage boys, I was really into video games. And I remember I was like looking at the game Need for Speed, where like the car is like on a turntable and it's slowly rotating. And I just like, I loved it, like the 3D shape of this thing. And obviously I couldn't afford any car, much less a sports car. But I thought like if I could create that in some 3D software, which I'd never tried before, it would almost feel in a way like part ownership, like I could be proud of that thing. And I tried a bunch, I think like 2 or 3 different 3D softwares, which are probably dead now. But then I came across an image which was hosted on blender.org, and it was a red sports car. And yeah, found it, saw that it was free. I thought, check, that's one box that I like, and downloaded it, and then hit a brick wall immediately because it's so hard to use, especially back then. It's gotten way, way easier since, but and I basically had to teach myself just from tutorials, like text tutorials that people had written back then. And that was kind of my motivation. Like I thought if somebody else could teach themselves to make that red car, then so could I. And that was like the mission. And it took like 4 years after that to before I could actually make my own red sports car. But that was the what motivated me.
Oh.
And you've been in love ever since with Blender?
I mean, love, hate, it's like any software you use on a day-to-day basis. There's things you like, there's things you don't. But Blender actually just released like a massive update to their software called Blender 2.8. I don't know why they went. That was like the big release. They should have just called it version 3 maybe. But anyways, and it's way, way better. It's like everything that was crappy about the old version, they fixed. So actually there's been a huge uptick in people trying to learn Blender since then. And actually, since the coronavirus, everyone's being self-quarantining from home. I've also seen like 60% more viewers of people learning the beginner series to Blender. So
Right.
yeah.
Actually,
I was going to bring that up because, like there's virtually the world is locked down or self-isolating of some level. Some more extreme than others, but there's a lot more time and there's a lot of uncertainty in the world and people want to learn new skills and as well as consume content. And you're kind of in that sphere of both YouTube and people watching your content, but also you teach people skills around stuff that they can do on their computer and online. So yeah, I was really curious to see what you were seeing in the last 3 to 4 weeks since, at least here in Australia, we've been for about a month or maybe 5 weeks. We've been in this lockdown world. What's been happening on your channel? And obviously, you said 60% increase in people. But anything else you've sort of noticed in that space?
Yeah, I guess it's like there's probably 2 camps of people when you hear that there's going to be self-quarantining for maybe 3 weeks, maybe 3 months, maybe a year. Is some people think like, I'll just lounge around, wait this out, maybe get the Disney Plus subscription as well as my Netflix subscription. And then others that think this is a chance to learn a new skill. So I'm sure there are people learning coding. There are people like myself that actually are learning like drawing, which is sort of like a side hobby of mine. I want to get good at drawing people. So I'm sure people doing that. And then 3D, a lot of industries are moving to 3D. Photographers are finding that their work that was previously photographing furniture or products, architects that used to do drawings, all that kind of thing is now being done with 3D software. So a lot of people have known about 3D software slowly encroaching on their career for a long time. And I think a lot of people are making the switch. They're going like, all right, I got 3 months at home. Let's try and learn it. So it's actually been really, really interesting. Like just on Instagram, just seeing like some like master 2D artists that do like oil paintings, and they're learning Blender through this donut tutorial that I made, and became like a little viral hit in the Blender community.
Can we just
it's really cool.
talk about that, because the donut is what like a lot of people came to know you by, right? Like you were the donut guy.
I reckon.
Yes, I should explain the donut, right?
Yeah.
It's almost more known as Donut Guy than Blender Guru, I reckon, aren't you?
I know that's actually true. So half the people go, "Oh, you're the donut guy," which, just to make things even more confusing to anyone listening in on the conversation, I'm the Blender Guru who doesn't do any blending, and I'm also the donut guy
Who doesn't make donuts?
None of which has anything to do with food. It's all 3D. So basically, like 3 years ago, I decided I'm finally going to do a beginner series for Blender, because before that I was just doing like advanced tutorials for like professionals and people that have been with it for a while. But I thought, all right, fine, I'll do a beginner series. And I had like a couple of ideas on like how I could teach it. Like I could make, because I wanted to make something simple that you could actually learn the software with. but wasn't too complex that you would get lost. And I'm like, I could make a snowman, quite simple shapes. I could do this. And I presented like 4 ideas to my wife, and she pointed to the donut and she goes, that one, I want to make the donut. I was like, all right, so the donut it is. And made this series. I was really rushed. It was like, it had to be, it ended up being 10 parts, each one being about 20 minutes long. 3 years ago. And it was like right before I went to the Blender conference that year in Amsterdam. So I was like rushed trying to get it done before the date. And I even had a cold for like the last 3 recordings. So it was like not even a good, a good voiceover. And it became by far the biggest thing I've ever done or have been known for. And so since then, I've actually remade it for the new Blender 2.8 version that came out, because they changed a lot of keyboard shortcuts and everything. So I completely redid it. And it's consistently ranked at like the top of YouTube and Google for, if you type in Blender tutorial or Blender beginner something, you'll basically see it at the top there. And so that's why I'm known as both Blender Guru and the Donut Guy.
And to paint a picture of that donut, it's an impressive pink glazed donut, like the kind of, in my mind, it's like the quintessential Homer J. Simpson donut. Like
exactly.
It's like this big pink, beautiful. I think it's got sprinkles on top from memory.
Icing, sprinkles. Exactly.
So like it is this iconic, jumped out in your face, tasty looking donut that you create in a 3D software, and that to teach other people. It's a beautiful thing. It just sticks in your mind. It's just the donut, and props to your wife for picking that one too.
Yeah, I know, right? It became something.
Do you think?
It's a common thing you hear from YouTubers, right? Like their top video, you go like, "Wow, did you expect that?" And it's no, never. It's never the one you expect to be the popular one. It's always the little one that you put a little amount of effort into, and then the one that you spend weeks on and months on, it's like one of the lowest performing.
Did you learn, like, then, that was the first sort of beginner content that you'd made, beginner tutorial content. Did you then shift or change your perception of what you were going to do from then on?
I guess I saw it more as I saw my channel, like the potential of the channel maybe, as being, not this niche thing that, a lot of nerds know about and people within the Blender community know about, because it's like advanced tutorials on doing complex things, but more as a funnel, the sales funnel, that at the top of the funnel, it's the widest. And that's where people find you, and that's where they come into it. So before that, I didn't really have a funnel. I didn't have a thing people knew me from. But that's where I sort of realized, like, it could be the stepping stone that people make to their first steps in 3D software. And that's where I started to focus on, basically like the beginner experience and how to help people transition from complete beginner to making their own project and doing something, or even getting a job at a studio or becoming a freelancer.
Federico?
Right. Yeah. So look, obviously this has become a career for you. Did you ever think that this is where you'd end up in terms of what you were doing?
No. In fact, actually at the moment, I'm working on a photorealism series for people like, who want to create something that's indistinguishable from a photograph. And it's all to do with like the science of light and materials and physics. I'm actually on Twitter now going back and forth with a physics person to explain how different materials receive light. And it's getting into electrons and like electromagnetic waves and like all this technical stuff, which is hilarious because in school, I hated it. I absolutely hated this stuff because it didn't have any value. There was nothing that I could see myself doing with that information. And so I was like failed several subjects at school just from just hating it. And there was no point. But it's only now that like I can see that learning this technical science stuff, will enable me to create better artworks with it. I never would have thought I would be one day teaching light and physics and how materials react to light. yeah, like even knowing about it would just be a weird thing for me to think about back then. But yeah, no, never would have guessed.
Actually, speaking of light and physics, do you like watch like Toy Story and like Frozen and go like just focus only on the way the characters look and the light physics around it, that kind of thing, or do you actually watch these stories? Like, how amazing is it for you to see these animations?
Yeah, it's definitely hard to separate the two. Like I just finished watching Onward, the new Pixar movie that just came out. I guess because of COVID-19, they had to close all the cinemas. So all these movies that had cinema releases were now just going direct to iTunes or whatever. But yeah, just watch that. Phenomenal movie. Right. And it's also one of the most photorealistic of the Pixar movies. So there's like several scenes where there's like, you know, like light reflecting off the puddles on the road and like these little tiny pebbles. And I'm thinking like, oh, was that photo scanned? Did they, you know, did they use this light? Did they use real fog or was it fake fog? And like, it's kind of like a flip back and forth. And then you get like engrossed in the story and then you get pulled out thinking about technical stuff. But yeah, it's, you know, it's one of those fun things. I'm sure any crane operator, maybe whenever they watch a movie with a crane in it, they just completely lose the plot until it switches back. So yeah.
I mean, we have that issue. I know I have that issue with like continuity things being in like in film and TV. It's like when I'm watching a movie, I'll like stop it and I'll rewind it and I'll pause. Like, look, did you see that? That thing moved in the background. My wife's like, can you just watch the movie?
Oh,
you
like, must be the worst to watch with.
It's really
that's
bad.
Terrible.
Yeah, especially those throwaway comedies that don't spend much time thinking about that. They just like they film anything and just watching it. And I'm just watching it thinking, oh my God, this is the worst. Like,
yeah.
Oh gosh. But hey, if you like, you said like obviously you didn't think this is where you'd end up in terms of being someone who's going to teach this, but have you just fallen into it and you just really love what you're doing? Do you really enjoy the teaching process?
I do now. Yeah, like you know, the idea. In fact, I didn't even start the channel making these tutorials because I liked teaching. I started it because I wanted to become a freelancer. And when you're, you know, a new artist and you have no following whatsoever, I thought, what's one thing that I consume? Blender tutorials. So I started making Blender tutorials thinking that somebody saw that tutorial, they might hire me to do a job, which actually turned out to be the case. I got a job from a Sydney-based studio doing a Bridgestone tire commercial. So I helped them with like some smoke or something. I got that gig after like a year of doing my channel. And then I immediately realized that this sucks. Like this idea of freelancing, it's really boring because when while you're learning the software, you're doing the thing that you want to do. You're not forced to learn rigging if you don't want to learn rigging. But when when a client asks you to make this thing, they're telling you exactly what to do. Push this button, maybe not that specific, but you don't have a freedom in what you want to do. And I just really didn't like the experience at all. And coincidentally, that happened to be right before I went to my first ever Blender conference, which is in Amsterdam every year. And at the conference, the founder said in one of his presentations that there is a huge need for educational materials right now. A lot of people want to learn Blender. No one's making tutorials. And I thought, well, cool. I'll just keep doing this then. And since then, yeah, it's like knowing all this stuff, I've realized it, like if you have to teach something, it forces you to learn exactly how every single component works before you can actually tell others how to do it, which is a very rare experience that most people have, right? Like I talked to artists, I was in LA a year ago, from like these top studios and this and that. And I was kind of surprised that when it came to technical things, a lot of them didn't actually know, like, you know, how like rendering software works or how this works or the specifics of this, because they don't need to. For their job, they're, you know, it's design focused or it's this focused or that focused. It's very rare you need to go deep into something to fully know it enough to explain it to others. But it gives you an advantage knowing the inner workings because you learn each component, what each component does to a degree that that you're not guessing, right? Like a lot of, like even with drawing, like I'm learning to draw faces and humans right now. And like, if you don't know which skill to work on, you end up just making a mess. Every single drawing, you just make a mess, and you don't know why it looks terrible at the end. It just looks terrible. And it's only until you start breaking down each skill specifically to find out that like I'm just going to focus on proportions, just where my pencil moves, getting it to line up exactly with the photo reference. And if you just focus on that, you realize problems and mistakes that you're making so that you can fix it. If you don't, you'll never know what to work on next, and things just fail forever. And then you might even give up because you just feel like you're not getting anywhere. So anyways, it's a long answer just to say that, yeah, I do enjoy it. I enjoy learning the inner workings because it gives you a unique perspective.
You were talking about the Blender conference. Have you? That was the first time you went. You've gone subsequently more and more times, I presume, as time goes on.
Yeah, I think I've been to like 5 and now over the years. 5, yeah.
And obviously, as you became better known in the Blender community, did people start recognizing you at the conference as the Blender guy, the donut guy? How did that progress for you?
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of like one of the only places in the world I could go to be recognized. It's like you hear of like some other people that have a YouTube channel which is more general, or it's comedy or entertainment based, and they're getting stopped on the street like left, right, and center. In fact, one girl from Brisbane who just moved to Korea, and she has a channel that teaches like Korean what would you call it? Yeah, like just, I don't know, it's Korean culture focused, Korean food. And she's got it's a much smaller channel, but she said she gets stopped on the street every day because people know her in Korea as that person. But yeah, Blender conference, it's like the only place I walk in the door and you're seen as a celebrity. And then I step outside the door and I'm just another guy on the street. So it's definitely a unique experience, that's for sure.
And have you met the guy who like invented Blender?
Oh yeah, Ton Roosendahl. Yeah. He's at the conference every year, and yeah, I know him quite well. Yeah.
One thing to go back on that famous in the Blender world piece is that your channel isn't small by any sense of the word. Talking about it being niche and quite specific, but your channel is quite big though.
Yeah, it's blown up quite a lot. So it's 1.1 million subscribers or something, to the point that actually I have been recognized twice outside of the Blender conference in the last couple of months. Once was in Woolworths. The second one was also in Woolworths. Okay, well, 2 people at Woolworths,
same person,
just walking around, and some guy was like staring at me like up and down the aisles. I'm like, I don't know this guy, and he's just like kind of like following me, and he's like, "Are you the Blender guy?" I'm like, This separate world that I live in has collided with my personal world. This is weird, but yeah.
It's great, like and funny, like being so heavily involved in the community and so entrenched in this community. But then you leave that community and it's just like complete anonymity, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. And I've heard, I don't know, I was listening to the Tim Ferriss podcast, which is another great podcast. You guys should check out. But yeah, he said that
Tim's a massive fan of Creator Generation.
A huge fan. He sends us fan mail all the time. I daily get an email from Tim saying, guys, appear on my podcast. Can I appear? I'm like, Tim, you're just not the right fit for us.
Just stop.
Back off, man. Back off. We'll call you.
We don't have time to explain how we do what we do to you, Tim. It's like, it would blow his brain. It's just next level. But yeah, he's a big fan. Love you, Tim. Sorry, we love all our fans equally, though.
Yeah. So Tim was saying in I don't know, basically, like, he knows so many different performers and athletes, and a lot of them have said that it is better to be well known in one specific area than world famous, because and I think it was Bill Murray who said if you had the option between if you think you want to be rich and famous, try just being rich, because there's almost nothing that fame adds to it, and yet there are 100 things it takes away from. Being famous makes your life terrible. Being rich will open almost every door you would ever want and need, but your life is uninterrupted otherwise. So it is far better to be just rich. So yeah, that's reassuring, when you you think like, oh man, I'm just this niche guy, this nerdy guy, and all these other people are, getting all these free handouts. Like my sister, she's got a channel that's like, I don't know, 1/10 of the size maybe, but she gets so much free stuff, just gets flown around the world. She's like a vlogger. You can look her up, by the way. Currently Hannah is her YouTube channel.
Cool.
But yeah, no, vloggers get the free stuff. The nerdy guy that has the 3D animation channel gets nothing.
So obviously with Blender being the Blender Guru being your full-time career, can you just tell us how you've sort of grown? Obviously, you've grown this channel, but it's also, you've grown quite a big business around it. Can you talk to us about from the genesis of where that started from, like, oh, I have to earn money here, and how did you do that, to like what it is right now?
Yeah, so my approach to, my journey into YouTube is different to most, because nowadays most people start a channel with the expectation that once they hit a certain size, they'll have enough advertising revenue to make it a full-time job, right? But when I started in 2008, for one, YouTube couldn't hold my videos because my videos were over 10 minutes long, which is crazy. But back then it was a hard limit at 10 minutes. So I just didn't use YouTube. I was hosting mine on Vimeo. And so I wasn't making any money every time I uploaded a video. In fact, I was paying Vimeo because I had to have a pro Vimeo account to upload HD. It was different times, right? So from the get-go, I knew that I had to sell my own product in order to make money from it. So coincidentally, I went to a course at the same time that my dad gave me as a Christmas present. It was sort of like a product marketing, online business kind of course in Sydney. So I went there and I learned all about how easy it is to actually make something and sell it to an audience on the internet, which was a crazy concept at the time. So that kind of opened my eyes to, how to earn money. So I made my first ever product was an ebook. It was called the Wow Factor, and it taught people like how to do like special effects in Blender, like a lens flare or a chromatic aberration or something like that. It was $47 for this book, which is not cheap even by today's standards. And I released it, and it was a huge success. There was a lot of build up to it. I had like 2 weeks worth of like hype, which is what I learned at the course, like how to hype up a product that's going to come out so that by the time you actually launch it, you just get this huge flood of sales. And that was kind of like my first intro to selling stuff online. It enabled me to immediately quit my job at the time, which was a debt collector, believe it or not. I used to collect debt for Toyota. Yeah. Just calling people up and going, hey, pay your bill. That was my job.
It's so funny. I'm just trying to imagine that. I was trying to, it's like,
I know, it's total different world.
You like your car, man? You like your car? You want to keep your car, man? You give me your
exactly. You want that thing? Pay the money. They're looking for the money. Pay the money. Yeah. That was me. So I quit my job, and then it was like, what is my next product going to be? So then I made a course, like a video series course, which was really advanced at the time, hosted on this Kajabi website. Then I made a second course, called it the Architecture Academy, teaching you architecture. And then it was only, maybe 2012 that I realized that YouTube was really taking off. And not only had they reduced their 10-minute upload limit, but it was now basically the place to go for videos, and Vimeo was far, far into the wayside. So I switched to YouTube then, and I turned on adverts just because I think I probably didn't even have them on for the first year, but I just turned them on to see what would happen. And I think it wasn't a lot. It was making like $1,000 a month or something, which is better than nothing, but not enough to live off of. So my products were always like the source of revenue. I didn't have a full-time day job, obviously. This was my full-time job. So I had to make enough money from these products. And I also realized that the way that you sell these products is you talk about them, you do a trailer, you talk about them in your videos that you upload to YouTube, and you get this surge when the product comes out. And then it just tapers out, and you'll have like a few sales regularly every week or something after that. But that big spike, I had to make that last for the next year maybe before I released another product. And it was very hard to manage that sort of revenue flow. And so that was what actually inspired me to create a whole business, a whole different website called Polygon. So Poliigon, which is one of those startup names you have to give it because every other domain name is taken. So it's a misspelling of.
If it was a startup name, you'd have to remove all the vowels. So it'd be like plugin,
LGN,
PLGN, plugin, plugin.
Right.
Because now it's all removing the vowels.
Yes, exactly, or a misspelling of it. Yeah. So anyway, so this website was it's a subscription service, and instead of it being like a course on how to do something, it gave people textures. So in 3D software, you need a lot of textures like wood, brick, and all that things to apply it to models. And it was actually like a big annoyance of mine at the time was that the only existing product out there I thought was really terrible. Everyone had to use this terrible website, and I thought you could make something better. So I started Polygon. From that, it took far longer to build and way much more expensive. I think I spent like $120,000 just building the website because it had to have like a membership built into it with user accounts. You had to be able to download different types of files, find them easily. It was a huge learning experience just getting that off the ground. But yeah, now it's been about 4 years since I launched that, and it's still by far, obviously, the biggest revenue generator for myself and for, I guess, the company, which would be YouTube and Polygon together. So like, I think YouTube probably pays, because I know people like to know the revenue amounts. I think it probably pays like $2,000 to $4,000 a month. Yeah, just today. That's probably what they pay. And by the way, if people are wondering, like, what does a typical YouTuber make? You know how people ask that question?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what does a typical YouTuber make? And it's like, you can't give a straight answer because, like, there are people with channels that are like a fraction of my size, but they upload 10 times as many videos, or they hit a certain market that mine doesn't. And so they could be earning 10 times what I do per month with a fraction of this. So it's like, anyway, the whole ad revenue thing, it's hard to understand how it all works. But anyways, so $2,000 to $4,000 on YouTube, and then Polygon would earn a lot more. I don't want to give the exact amount, but at least 50 times more per month, right? Like it's completely, like, I don't really consider the YouTube thing as really almost a source of revenue. Selling your own product, by far, is a much bigger earner. Yeah.
And do you obviously have people working with you or working for you or collaborations? How does that work?
Oh yeah, I should explain also. That's not my revenue. So people would think like I'm a millionaire. No, so Polygon actually hires 20 people around the world. So they're all freelance contractors that work, and they go out and photograph the textures. They create 3D models that we put on the website. Web developers, that's $24,000 a month just to keep the website running. Believe it or not, it's like these things. It costs a lot to do this sort of business, but it's always growing, which is good. So we're always like, we hire more people. So essentially, whenever we're making a profit, we're just putting it back into the business to grow it bigger and bigger. And yeah, that's basically the way I run it.
Polygon, that's bigger than Blender, right? You're talking, assets for 3D, regardless of the product.
Exactly. Yeah. So that was actually also the other reason I started Polygon was, at the time, I could see that other 3D packages like 3ds Max or Maya had far more users, and also importantly, far more users that actually had money. Like Blender actually probably has about 10 times as many users as the next 3D software. But of course, the biggest reason for that is that it is free. So 12-year-old kids have it, 9-year-old kids have it installed, and they muck around with it. And a whole bunch of people have it installed but don't know what to do with it, right? Like, whereas a software like 3ds Max that costs $3,000 a year for a license, obviously you typically have a job with that software. So I started Polygon partly for the reasons I mentioned, but also because it wouldn't put all my eggs into the Blender basket. It would open it to the whole industry. So the textures can be used in any package regardless. And yeah, it's given me peace of mind when I go to sleep at night that like, what if Blender was to fail? What would I do? Yeah, don't have that fear anymore.
Nice. Hey, I mean, you make very very interesting videos, I guess, and I guess you integrate your own ads into those videos as opposed to getting sponsorship if you have your own company.
Yeah, so it's a kind of a unique sponsorship thing that I do, because like when most YouTubers go, and this video is sponsored by Squarespace, you know, they're getting paid 2,000, 5,000, whatever deal they've got to sponsor, you know, to do this 15-second plug, right? But in my case, either I promote it natively, like in a tutorial, I'll use an asset from Polygon. That's usually the best. Or if I'm not using it for that tutorial, but I still want to promote it, I might do a 15-second plug. So I might say, this video is sponsored by my own company, Polygon, which is kind of awkward. In fact, I even saw like somebody made a meme where it's like, sponsored by Polygon, and I'm giving myself a medal, like, and I've got this big grin on my face, which is kind of true. Yeah.
But does it work?
There's no transfer of money being made.
But does it work? Like when you mention your own company, do you see a spike?
Yeah, basically. I mean, it's hard to correlate the spikes in sales from a video. We actually want to that's something we're working on, is like better tracking of click, like where do people find Polygon from? But it's basically, we haven't had to, I mean, until like the last few months, we started actually doing Facebook and Google ads to experiment, but we've since turned it off. But basically all the sales through Polygon have come natively from YouTube. So enough people watch or discover a video of mine where I say, hey, check out Polygon, that, yeah, it's the entire ad campaign for Polygon, which is nice because you don't have to pay for ads, but you do have to use up your time to make the videos. But yeah.
Hey, so
that's powerful. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, you're obviously a very experienced video creator now. But like you said, when you first started, it was, you know, a little bit rough. Can you just tell us about like some of the lessons you've learned that going from, you know, starting off to where you are right now, and sort of how you improved your videos, especially because you're in the education space effectively, right? You teach people how to do something, which is obviously very different to vlogging. You know, you've got to explain things in a very clear way. People have to be engaged with you. But can you tell us about that process? What has gone into improving your videos over time?
Yeah, definitely. Like most YouTubers, if they watch their old content, it's very cringe inducing. It's really hard to watch, and I'm the same. It's if I watch even like a video from like 3 or 4 years ago, it's too much to bear. Some things that I've learned that I do things differently now is basically like a greater appreciation for people's time. When I started making the videos up until maybe 4 years ago, it was like a casual, almost like a podcast format, where I would hit record and I'd show people how to make something. And however long it took, that was how long it took. And I might make some stumbles along the way, and the tutorial might be 40 minutes long, right? Now, the idea of releasing a 40-minute video is that it would have to be really good content to be 40 minutes long. Now I know that most people do not have that time. And it was something that always annoyed me, was when I looked at the YouTube analytics, the start of the video, it would just plummet. The first like 10 seconds or whatever, you would just see like half the people would drop. And I was like, oh my God, what can I do to, you know, retain the audience for longer? So I started experimenting with doing like recording the voiceover first and then editing in the Blender part later on, which is a lot harder to do, especially when you're saying, and click this and click this. It's like, how do you time that right? I've gotten better at it, I guess, over time. But I started experimenting with that format, and it, not surprisingly, it works far, far better. People are much more appreciative of a video that can tell them the same thing in 7 minutes worth of time versus 40 minutes. And even if the 40-minute version is more casual, maybe it's even more fun and it's more personal, maybe people get to know you, the 7-minute version is always just going to be far better for most people. It's like, you know, if you look at like Joe Rogan's podcast, right? The number one podcast forever, probably. His episodes are like 2 hours long, right? But then he releases these clips of just a short snippet where they focus on one specific conversation or discussion around, I don't know, Instagram models or something. And he'll release that video in a clip format, which is only 5 minutes long. And those videos get an equal amount of views probably as the entire episode. Like, and they're much more, I would guess most people probably find his content through those clips than actually his full episodes as well, because yeah, it's hard to recommend to your family, like, hey, you should listen to this episode, and then it's 2 hours long. Whereas if you say, here's a 5-minute video, yeah, it's much more approachable. So yeah, you have a bigger funnel because it's shorter content. People are more people can tell you're respectful of their time. And then I guess the thing that has to go with that, because this was something else I learned, was that if you only go full on like rehearsed, this is what I'm going to say, this is how I'm going to say it, and I've got it down to the second, you end up without any personality, devoid of personality. So some of those videos that I did early on of this rehearsed format actually did really poorly because it sounded like a rehearsed script that I was reading, because I was. There was none of that like, oh, like here's a little joke and here's a little, a pause at the right place and this and that. And so learning how to make it both, like a shortened format, but also friendly and casual and raw for the YouTube audience has been something I would hope I've done better since then. Yeah.
Yeah, because in the past, I remember you mentioned you even tried like a really like hyper, like YouTube stereotypical way of presenting things.
Oh, yeah, like a radio DJ. Hey, guys, Andrew Price here from Blender Guru. How's it going? Yeah, and that's really exhausting to listen to after like 5 seconds.
How long did it take you to pull yourself out of that one, do you reckon?
Yeah, actually, I think it was probably 4 years, maybe.
Wow.
I was making that high energy content for 4 years. And I actually remember when I stopped doing it, because for one, I could realize it was a problem to even record, because when you're trying to keep up that energetic voice, it's also really hard to think about the next thing to say. So you end up throwing in all this filler talk, which you actually see sometimes at like events when there's an MC that's maybe a little green, and they're doing the hyped up voice. You could tell they don't really know what they're going to say next. And so it ends up it's very annoying to listen to. But yeah, it was like 4 years. And when I stopped doing it, I remember people, or at least one comment that I read was like, oh, Andrew, you sound sadder nowadays.
Oh.
And I thought, yeah, probably. I mean, if you thought that was my normal voice, you probably would think I've fallen into a deep depression, because now I talk like this. So, but that was, one comment or whatever. And I'm sure the vast 99.99% of people appreciate that I don't do that voice anymore. So yeah, I think they said the same thing about radio. Like when radio came out, there was even, I think you can look it up online, called the Atlantic accent.
Yes.
And it was a specific accent which was only found on people who present on the radio. It was this, and now we press to the like that kind of voice, because people that were new to this medium, that had never done it before, didn't know what format works best. And actually another example is the talk show format. Conan O'Brien, Jay Leno, all those talk shows, they had a desk, right? And there's a desk, and they sit behind the desk and they talk. And most talk shows still do that. But you're realizing now over the years that some of them are switching to a couch format where you sit on couches. And the reason for that is that, from what I've heard, nobody knows why they're doing it behind a desk. That's like a job interview. It's like this really weird, like, I'm going to be asking the question, so I've got a desk, and you have to sit in that chair, and I'll throw questions to you, and then you answer them, like a very stilted thing. So now they're realizing, let's just get rid of the desk. Let's just sit on couches. So some talk shows are starting to do that. Rightfully so, I think. So when these new mediums come about, it's hard to know what should work and what should be the standard, and it kind of discovers itself over the years. So
So,
Yeah, I tell myself that whenever I cringe thinking about those old videos, I'm like, all right, but I just didn't know what the format was yet. I didn't know how it should be. So yeah.
What's your advice to other creators to find like their own tone and style and not get stuck in 4 years of doing something that doesn't fit? I think the stereotype of vloggers, you know,
Oh,
hi
yeah.
guys, welcome to my channel. Like, you know, like even if that
Yeah.
isn't what they want to say, like how do you find that? Like it took you 4+ more years, maybe 10, to find, you know, that place for you. But you know, how do you flatten
Yeah,
the
good
curve?
question.
Hey?
Yeah. I would first of all say it shouldn't take 4 years. That was my stubbornness, perhaps, or my lack of awareness of what I was doing. It will take some time, definitely. Like something we're trying to do for Polygon right now is hire other artists to actually make tutorials for Polygon. And it's really hard to do because most pro artists, people that are really good at making art, are not also people making tutorials. They haven't done a format where they talk into a microphone to somebody who's not there, but will be listened to by thousands of people later on. It's a very weird, it's weird when you haven't tried it before. So the first time you turn on a camera, if you're like, all right, day one of my vlog, it's gonna be stilted. It's gonna be nervous. And I don't know if there's any way around that. Like you could spend probably months reading books on how to be a YouTuber or how to find your voice. And I don't know if it would actually help. It's like the same thing they say about like stand-up, like comedians doing stand-up. Like all pro comedians will tell you today, like there's no point, like any comedy class or a course that you do on how to do comedy, they are just robbing you blind because nothing you learn in that class will teach you as well as standing up on stage and actually trying it. So there's definitely that degree of it when it comes to YouTube. You have to try it and it's going to suck, but that's fine because the good thing is not many people are going to be watching you. And that's a blessing at the start. It won't sound like a blessing, but it is. The other thing, so the first thing is just try it. You'll just get, the nerves will get past you the more you do it. It probably won't ever leave you, by the way. I still feel a little nervous whenever I hit record and I have to do the intro 3 or 4 different times because I felt too nervous. Like it's always going to be that. I don't think there's a problem with that, but it'll just be far less than when you got started. The second thing though that will definitely help you is finding a mentor or somebody that you like the way they talk, the way they present. And I actually listen to some of the people that I really enjoy. I've got like a notepad list or whatever with links in it. And I listen to these different people, the way they talk. And I just watch those videos before I start recording a tutorial. And it helps me get into the mindset of whatever it is that I like about them. So like I listen to these 2 guys from Game Grumps. It's like this YouTube channel about gaming. And that was what first opened my eyes to like the casual performance of, like, instead of it being a performance, it felt like 2 guys sitting on a couch just chatting. So I listened to those videos. Marquez Brownlee, MBK, whatever his actual channel name is. The way he presents things is also really nice. There's a bunch, but basically find whoever it is that you like and you want to mimic. And that'll definitely help. And there's nothing wrong with imitating people, by the way. People think that's bad to imitate, but everybody imitates there's no way you can't not imitate somebody else. Even if you think you're not imitating someone, you are. So what you should do is have multiple sources to pull from, not just like one person that you want to copy, like a plagiarism, but like multiple people. And that's how I would say how to find your voice.
Andrew, that was awesome, because normally at the end of one of these podcasts, we say, like, give us your top tips, and those were excellent top tips you did already without being prompted. Is there anything else, any other top tips
See what
you
I
want to
did there?
give?
I snuck that in. Yeah.
Anything else you want to do? Any other little bits of advice you want to give people, or you think those are the big ones?
Just let me think. Oh yeah, I would say, going back to the money issue, like I think it's important to definitely have, to think about money, because there's no way you're going to be able to do it full time and therefore make videos for your audience on a frequent enough basis. There's no way you're going to do that without it replacing your full-time income. But starting with that goal in mind, I think, is the wrong way to go. Because as they say in business, if you only listen to split testing, like A/B split testing, like test this sales page, change the color of this button, test it against this. If you only follow that, everyone would end up selling porn. because if you only listen to the money, if you only listen to what viewers will click on and what thumbnails do the best, you end up going down a rabbit hole of basically you become a scammer, like somebody who is trying to mislead people with misleading thumbnails, misleading titles that try to capture their attention, but then it's 13 minutes and you only mention it at like 5 seconds near the end or something. And people, that doesn't work. There's not a long-term, there's no like long-term career out of that. People will only fall for that so often. I think even Casey Neistat is starting to realize that. Like, you remember like 2 or 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, his titles and thumbnails were really kind of obnoxious, like, to be honest. And I'm sure he probably even knows it as well. But I don't think you can do that at least regularly nowadays. Like, it just doesn't really work. So, I think that coming to it purely from a like money standpoint, what can I do to get more views? How can I get those views above all else? Is a bad idea. You have to have that. You have to know that that's something you're working towards, but you have to have values, that what you value, what sort of content that you're making, you want to stick to that, because if you just pursue the money, you'll end up doing something you would rather not be doing in 5 years from now. So that's the last tip I'd give.
That's an excellent point. Absolutely.
You are the guru.
You are indeed. Look, hey, we have run out of time, but I do have one more question. Have you ever created a 3D object that is in fact a blender?
No, I let the rest of the community do that, because there's too many people that have thought of that idea.
Right.
And even when I was using Blender as a teenager and I saw that, I was like, "Oh, come on, guys."
How about a blender with
creative than that?
With all your donuts?
Yeah, the software's called Blender, so I'm going to make a blender. Isn't that cool?
But you yourself haven't done one yet.
I have not done one yet. I guess I could make it like a beginner part 2 or something. Like something slightly more advanced than the donut is a blender.
Or what happens to the donut if you put it in a blender?
Exact. The next step. Yeah.
Like
reusing old content. Yeah, I like it.
Donut crumbs.
Nice. Andrew,
in 3D.
Andrew, thanks so much for joining us. Fantastic tips. We are definitely going to get a lot of people talking about this. Everyone else, we will see you next time. For now, bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Create a generation. Look on the mic.